I thought I knew my fiancée until a stranger showed up with photos proving she'd been married before to him. What he revealed about her pattern with men made my blood run cold. But nothing prepared me for what happened at her company party. My name's Devin Kramer. I'm 39 years old, and I make my living as a freelance programmer. I work mostly with small businesses, building websites and custom software solutions from my home office in Columbus, Ohio. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and gives me the freedom to set my own schedule. I've always been more comfortable behind a computer screen than in a crowded room full of people making small talk. That's probably why I fell so hard for Reena Holloway when I met her 4 years ago. She was everything I wasn't: confident, outgoing, the kind of person who could walk into any room and immediately become the center of attention. Reena worked as a sales manager for a medical equipment company, and she was damn good at her job. She could sell ice to an Eskimo, as they say. We met at a coffee shop downtown on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was nursing my second cup of black coffee, debugging code on my laptop, when this stunning brunette in a sharp business suit asked if she could share my table. The place was packed, and I was hogging a 4-person table all to myself. "Sure thing," I said, closing my laptop halfway. "I'm Devin, by the way." "Reena," she replied with a smile that could light up Times Square. "And thank you. Some of us actually have to leave the house for work." I laughed, thinking it was just friendly banter. Looking back, that comment should have been my first clue. She had this way of making jokes that had just enough bite to sting, but delivered with such charm that you almost felt grateful for the attention. We started talking, and I was completely captivated. Reena had this magnetic personality that drew people in like moths to a flame. She told me about her job, her goals, her dreams of traveling the world. I found myself sharing things about my work that I'd never bothered explaining to anyone before. She seemed genuinely interested in what I did, asking smart questions about programming and web development. "So you're like a digital architect," she said, stirring sugar into her latte. "Building things that exist in cyberspace instead of the real world." "That's actually a pretty good way to put it," I replied, impressed by her understanding. We exchanged numbers that day, and she texted me before I even made it back to my apartment. The message was simple: "Thanks for sharing your table and your fascinating world. Coffee again soon." Those early weeks were like something out of a romantic comedy. Reena would call me at random times during the day, just to hear my voice. She'd send me photos of interesting things she saw while making sales calls around the city. She made me feel like I was the most interesting man in Ohio, which was saying something since I spent most of my time talking to computers. But even in those honeymoon days, there were moments that gave me pause. Little comments here and there that seemed designed to keep me off balance. She'd tease me about my programmer uniform of jeans and button-down shirts, or make jokes about how I probably hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. "You need someone to drag you into the real world," she'd say with that dazzling smile. "Lucky for you, I'm up for the challenge." I told myself she was just trying to help me become more social, more confident. After all, she was right. I did spend too much time alone with my code. Maybe having someone like Reena in my life would be good for me. 3 months into our relationship, Reena started showing her true colors, though I was too love-struck to recognize the pattern. It began with subtle digs disguised as playful teasing, usually when we were around other people. The first time it really stung was at my buddy Mike's birthday party. Mike and I had known each other since college. He was one of the few people who understood my introverted nature and never made me feel weird about it. His backyard barbecue was supposed to be a laid-back evening with burgers, beer, and good conversation. Reena was in her element, charming everyone within a 5-foot radius. She had this gift for making instant connections with strangers, asking just the right questions to get people talking about themselves. I admire that about her, even envied it a little. "So this is the famous Devin we've heard so much about," said Mike's neighbor, Janet, when Reena introduced me around. "Oh yes, my adorable hermit," Reena said with a laugh that made everyone smile. I practically had to drag him out of his cave for this party. He'd live on energy drinks and take out Chinese food if I didn't civilize him. Everyone chuckled, and I forced a smile, but something about the word hermit bothered me. It wasn't technically wrong. I did prefer quiet evenings at home, but the way she said it made it sound like a character defect that needed fixing. Later that evening, when we were driving home in my Honda Civic, I decided to bring it up. "Hey, about what you said at the party." I began carefully. "The hermit comment kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Reena looked genuinely surprised. What do you mean? I was just being playful. Everyone could see how much I adore you. I know, but it felt like you were making fun of my lifestyle in front of people who don't really know me. I explained. Devin, honey, you're being way too sensitive, she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I'm trying to help you see yourself the way other people do. You spend too much time alone, and it's not healthy. I'm looking out for you. The way she said it made me feel like I was overreacting. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being too sensitive. After all, she was the social expert between the two of us. You're probably right, I said, though something in my gut still felt unsettled. Of course I'm right, Reena said with that brilliant smile. Trust me, baby. I know what I'm doing. That became her standard response whenever I questioned her behavior. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. And like an idiot, I did trust her. I convinced myself that her comments came from a place of love, that she was trying to help me become a better version of myself. Over the next few weeks, the comments became more frequent and more pointed. She'd joke about my programmer wardrobe when we went shopping, suggesting I needed to dress like a grown-up if I wanted people to take me seriously. She'd tease me about my methodical way of approaching problems, calling it analysis paralysis in front of her friends. Each time, when I tried to discuss it privately, she'd use the same deflection tactics. I was being too sensitive. She was just trying to help. I should trust her judgment about social situations. I started to wonder if maybe there was something wrong with me after all. A year and a half into our relationship, I decided enough was enough. Reena's playful teasing had escalated to the point where I dreaded social gatherings. Every event became an opportunity for her to highlight my supposed shortcomings while positioning herself as my patient, long-suffering girlfriend. The breaking point came at her company's annual holiday party. Reena had been excited about it for weeks, buying a new dress and talking about how important it was for her career that I make a good impression on her colleagues and clients. Just be yourself, but maybe a little more outgoing, she had said while adjusting my tie that evening. These people need to see that I'm with someone who can hold his own in conversation. The party was held at a fancy hotel downtown, complete with an open bar and a DJ playing music loud enough to make normal conversation impossible. I stuck close to Reena, nursing a beer and trying to look interested while she worked the room like a seasoned politician. That's when she introduced me to her biggest client, a guy named Richard who owned 3 medical clinics in the city. Richard, this is my boyfriend Devin, she said, practically glowing with excitement. He's a computer programmer, which basically means he speaks a language the rest of us don't understand. Richard chuckled and shook my hand. Technology, huh? I have to admit, anything more complicated than email makes my head spin. Oh, you should see him in action, Reena continued. Devin can sit at his computer for 12 hours straight without moving. It's like watching a statue that occasionally types. I felt my jaw tighten. Richard laughed politely, but I could see the judgment in his eyes. In his world, 12-hour workdays probably meant closing million-dollar deals, not debugging code in solitude. The drive home was tense. I waited until we were back in my apartment before I finally said what was on my mind. We need to talk, I announced, turning to face her directly. About what? Reena asked, though something in her expression suggested she knew exactly what I meant. About the way you talk about me in front of other people, I said firmly. I'm tired of being your punchline. For the first time since I'd known her, Reena looked genuinely taken aback. Devin, I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do, I replied, my voice steady and calm. Tonight you made me sound like some antisocial robot who can't function in the real world. That's not teasing, Reena. That's humiliation. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating her response. Finally, she sighed and sat down on my couch. You're right, she said quietly. I guess I got carried away trying to be entertaining. I didn't realize how it sounded. That apology was the first genuine moment of accountability I'd seen from her. For the next few months, she kept her word. The public mockery stopped, and she found other ways to be the center of attention that didn't involve making me the butt of her jokes. I started to believe we might actually have a future together. 6 months after our serious conversation, I made what I thought was the smartest decision of my life. Reena had kept her promise about respecting me in public, and our relationship felt stronger than ever. She still had her moments of intensity, but I attributed that to her passionate personality rather than any fundamental character flaw. I decided to propose on a crisp October evening at our favorite restaurant, a quiet Italian place where we'd had our first official date. Nothing flashy or public, just the two of us and a ring I'd spent 2 months researching and saving for. "Reena," I said, getting down on one knee beside our corner table, "you've changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. Will you marry me?" The look of pure joy on her face when she saw the ring made every dollar I'd spent worth it. She said yes before I even finished the question, and suddenly the quiet restaurant erupted in applause from other diners who'd been watching. "It's perfect," she whispered, examining the 1-carat diamond I'd chosen. "Devin, it's absolutely perfect." The next few weeks felt like a fairy tale. Reena threw herself into wedding planning with an energy that was both impressive and slightly overwhelming. She had spreadsheets for everything: venues, caterers, florists, photographers. She approached our wedding like a military campaign, and I found myself getting swept up in her enthusiasm. "I want everything to be perfect," she told me one evening as she scrolled through venue websites on her laptop. "This is going to be the most important day of our lives." I was happy to let her take the lead on most of the planning. Wedding details weren't exactly my strong suit, and Reena had much better taste when it came to things like flowers and decorations. My main contributions were handling the budget spreadsheet and keeping track of our guest list. For about a month, we worked together like a real team. Reena would research options and narrow down choices. Then we'd make the final decisions together. She valued my input on practical matters like costs and logistics, and I appreciated her eye for style and presentation. "See how good we are at this," she said one night after we'd successfully booked our venue and photographer on the same day. "We make a great team when we're working toward the same goal." She was right. Those weeks of wedding planning showed me a side of our partnership I hadn't seen before. Reena was organized, decisive, and surprisingly good at staying within her budget. I started to picture our married life as an extension of this collaboration, two people with different strengths working together to build something meaningful. The engagement photos turned out beautifully. Reena had chosen a local park with fall foliage as our backdrop, and the photographer captured us looking genuinely happy and in love. When she posted them on social media, the response was overwhelmingly positive. "You two are perfect together," her friend Sarah commented. "Finally, a guy who can keep up with our Reena," added her cousin Michelle. Reading those comments, I felt proud to be marrying someone so well regarded by the people who knew her best. Maybe I'd been overthinking her personality quirks. Maybe what I'd interpreted as criticism was really just her way of pushing me to be my best self. I should have known that the calm wouldn't last forever. 3 months after our engagement, a knock on my apartment door changed everything. I was working on a client's website redesign when I heard the firm deliberate rapping that somehow didn't sound like any delivery guy or neighbor I'd encountered before. I opened the door to find a tall, lean man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a 5 o'clock shadow. He was wearing jeans and a worn leather jacket, looking like he'd driven a long way to get here. "Are you Devin Kramer?" he asked. "Yeah, that's me," I replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" "My name's Blake Thornton," he said, extending his hand. "I need to talk to you about Reena Holloway." The name hit me like a cold splash of water. "How do you know my fiancée?" "Because she used to be my wife," Blake said simply. I stared at him for a long moment, processing what he'd just said. Reena had never mentioned being married before. In fact, when we talked about past relationships, she'd specifically said she'd never been serious enough with anyone to consider marriage. "I think you've got the wrong person," I said, starting to close the door. "She's got a small scar on her left shoulder from when she fell off her bike as a kid," Blake said quickly. "She makes this little humming sound when she's concentrating on something. And she has this way of tilting her head when she's about to say something she thinks is clever." My blood ran cold. Those details were too specific, too accurate for this to be a case of mistaken identity. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Blake followed me into my living room, looking around with the kind of careful observation that suggested he was comparing my space to something in his memory. "We were married for 2.5 years," he began without preamble. "Divorced about 8 months ago." "That's impossible," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I was calculating timelines in my head. "We've been together for almost 2 years. Then she was cheating on both of us," Blake said matter-of-factly, which, knowing Reena, doesn't surprise me one bit. I sat down heavily on my couch, feeling like the room was spinning slightly. Why are you telling me this? Because I found out about you from some mutual friends, and I figured you deserve to know what you're getting into, Blake replied. Reena's got a pattern, and you're following the same script I did. He pulled out his phone and showed me photos from their wedding day. There was no mistaking Reena's face, radiant in a white dress as she kissed a younger-looking version of the man sitting across from me. She starts sweet, then slowly chips away at your confidence, Blake continued. Makes you think you're lucky to have someone like her, that you need to work harder to deserve her attention. My mouth went dry. What else? The public humiliation, he said, watching my expression carefully. She'd make these little jokes about me in front of people, always with his smile like it was just harmless teasing. I felt like I was going to be sick. Blake wasn't finished destroying my world. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope that looked like it had been carried around for weeks. I brought these in case you didn't believe me, he said, handing me the envelope. Inside were copies of their marriage certificate, divorce papers, and a thick stack of printed text messages. My hands were shaking as I flipped through them, seeing Reena's name and phone number attached to conversations that made my stomach turn. Read the ones from last month, Blake said quietly. I found the conversations he was referring to and felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Reena had been texting Blake throughout our entire engagement, complaining about me in the cruelest terms possible. This new guy is even more pathetic than you were, one message read. At least you had some backbone sometimes. Devin just takes whatever I dish out and asks for more. Another message made my hands clench into fists. I'm going to marry him for the financial security, but I'll need some real excitement on the side. Think you might be interested in rekindling old flames. Blake had responded with increasingly angry messages, telling her to leave him alone and stop playing games with people's lives. She kept reaching out to me even after you proposed, Blake explained. I started saving the messages because I figured someone would need to see them eventually. I set the papers down and looked at Blake directly. How long did it take you to figure out what she was? Too long, he admitted. About 1.5 years. I kept making excuses for her behavior, thinking she was just going through a rough patch or that I wasn't being understanding enough. What made you finally see it? She humiliated me at my company's Christmas party, Blake said, his jaw tightening at the memory. Made me look like a complete fool in front of my boss and coworkers. When I confronted her about it later, she laughed and said I deserved it for being boring. The parallel to my own experiences was chilling. What did you do? Filed for divorce the next morning, he said simply. Best decision I ever made, even though it cost me half of everything I owned. I stood up and walked to my window, staring out at the parking lot while my mind raced. Everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Reena was a lie. The woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd planned to marry, was a complete fabrication. There's something else, Blake said behind me. Something you need to know before you make any decisions about what to do next. I turned around, not sure I could handle any more revelations. She's been married before me too, he said. A guy named Steven, about 6 years ago. Same pattern, sweet at first, then gradually more controlling and cruel. I tracked him down after our divorce, and his story was identical to ours. 3 marriages, 3 men who'd fallen for the same act, endured the same treatment, and eventually been discarded when Reena got bored or found someone new. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. Because someone tried to warn me about her, and I didn't listen, Blake said, standing up. I thought I was different, that our love was special. I wasted 3 years of my life learning the hard way that some people can't be fixed or changed. He handed me his business card. If you need someone to talk to who understands what you're going through, call me. And Devin, don't wait as long as I did to get out. Blake's revelations hit me like a freight train, but I needed to see Reena's true colors with my own eyes before I could accept that everything had been a lie. That opportunity came at her company's annual client appreciation party, a black tie event at the downtown Marriott where all her biggest accounts would be present. This is so important for my career, Reena had said while getting ready. Everyone who matters in the medical equipment industry will be there tonight. I wore my best suit and tried to push Blake's warnings out of my mind. Maybe there was an explanation for everything. Maybe Blake was a bitter ex-husband trying to sabotage her happiness. The party was in full swing when we arrived. Reena immediately began working the room, introducing me to clients and colleagues with her usual charm. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. She was professional, engaging, and proud to have me by her side. Then she had a few drinks. Ladies and gentlemen, Reena announced to a circle of her biggest clients, I want you all to meet my fiancé, Devin. He's a computer programmer, which means he basically lives in a fantasy world of ones and zeros. Everyone chuckled politely, but I felt the familiar sting of public mockery. You should see him at home, she continued, warming to her audience. I bought him a treadmill 6 months ago, and I swear it's turned into the world's most expensive clothes rack. This man gets winded walking to the mailbox. The laughter was louder this time, and I felt my face burning with humiliation. Reena, I said quietly, maybe we should. Oh, and the best part, she interrupted, turning to face me with that brilliant smile that no longer fooled me, is that he thinks he's ready for marriage. Ladies, pray for me. I'm about to spend my life with a man who can't even change a light bulb without watching 3 YouTube tutorials first. The circle erupted in laughter, and in that moment, I realized that my fiancée had just humiliated me in front of everyone who mattered to her career. She wasn't defending me or building me up. She was tearing me down for sport. I looked around at the faces staring at me, waiting for my reaction. Some looked amused, others uncomfortable, but all of them had just watched the woman I loved turn me into a punchline. You know what, Reena? I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet circle. You're absolutely right. I'm not ready for marriage. Not to someone who thinks humiliating her partner is entertainment. I pulled the engagement ring from my pocket. I'd been carrying it since Blake's visit, unsure what to do with it. Consider this my formal withdrawal from your comedy routine, I said, placing the ring on the cocktail table beside her. Find yourself a new audience. I walked out of that hotel with my head held high, leaving behind the sound of shocked whispers and Reena calling my name. The drive home from the hotel was the longest 20 minutes of my life. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and I kept replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Had I just made the biggest mistake of my life? Or had I finally stood up for myself? My phone started ringing before I even made it back to my apartment. Reena's name flashed on the screen again and again, but I let every call go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear her explanations or apologies. Not yet. When I finally listened to the messages an hour later, they followed a predictable pattern. The first few were angry, accusing me of overreacting and embarrassing her in front of important clients. Then came the tearful apologies, promising she'd had too much to drink and didn't mean anything she'd said. The final message was pure manipulation. Devin, please don't throw away everything we've built over one mistake. I love you. But Blake's words kept echoing in my mind. Same pattern, different victim. I spent the weekend alone, ignoring the constant stream of texts and calls from Reena. On Monday morning, I called my father and told him everything about Blake's visit, about the pattern of behavior, about what had happened at the party. Son, my dad said after I finished the whole story, it sounds like you dodged a bullet. A woman who truly loves you doesn't tear you down to build herself up. But Dad, what if I'm wrong? What if she really was just having a bad night? Devin, he said firmly, I raise you to be a man of integrity and self-respect. Don't let anyone convince you that you deserve to be treated as less than that. Not even someone you love. Tuesday brought a surprise visitor. Reena showed up at my apartment door, looking perfectly put together despite the emotional chaos of the past few days. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into my living room. I think you said everything you needed to say at the party, I replied, but I closed the door and faced her. Devin, I made a terrible mistake, she began, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine emotion. I had too much to drink, I was trying too hard to impress clients, and I said things I didn't mean. Please don't let one bad night destroy our entire future. For a moment, looking at her beautiful, tearful face, I almost wavered. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd made me believe I could be more than just a guy who worked alone with computers. But then I remembered Blake's warning about the pattern, and I thought about all the small humiliations I'd endured over the years, all dismissed as just jokes or harmless teasing. Reena, I said, my voice steady and calm, I don't think you made a mistake. I think you showed me exactly who you really are. That's not true, she protested. You know me better than anyone. No, I said, pulling out the printed text messages Blake had given me. I know who you pretended to be, but this is who you really are. I handed her the papers, and I watched her face go pale as she read her own words about how pathetic I was. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "From Blake. Your husband. The one you forgot to mention when we talked about past relationships." The mask finally fell away completely. "Blake's a bitter loser who can't accept that I moved on," she said, her voice hardening. "And if you believe his lies over my word, then maybe you're not the man I thought you were." "You're right," I said, opening my apartment door. "I'm not the man you thought I was. I'm better than that." 3 months after leaving Reena, my life fell apart. She'd launched a social media campaign painting me as unstable, and my business suffered as clients began avoiding me. The isolation hit hard. Friends chose sides, and I found myself drinking alone most nights. My brother Jake intervened when I missed his daughter's birthday party. He found me hungover on a Tuesday afternoon. "You look like hell," he said bluntly. "Thanks for the support," I muttered. "Devin, what's going on? You're letting her destroy you, even though she's gone." I told him everything. Blake's warnings, Reena's manipulation, how she was still controlling my life through a victim narrative. "She's winning," I admitted, even though I know I did the right thing. Jake sat quietly for a moment. "Dad would say living well is the best revenge. You can't control what she does, but you can control how you respond." That conversation changed everything. I stopped checking her social media, started exercising again, and focused on rebuilding my business with clients who value my work. 2 weeks later, Reena appeared at my door at 11 p.m., clearly pregnant and crying. "Devin, I need your help," she pleaded. "Blake left me when he found out about the baby. I have nowhere else to turn." Looking at her standing there, vulnerable and desperate, I felt the familiar tug of sympathy. But then I noticed how carefully she'd positioned herself under the porch light for maximum dramatic effect. "Reena, this isn't my responsibility anymore," I said quietly. "But we have history," she insisted. "You loved me once. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means I hope you find help you need, but it won't be from me." I closed the door gently but firmly. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. 6 months later, my life had completely transformed. My business was thriving with 3 new clients who appreciated my reliability. I joined a hiking group and met Sarah, a veterinarian who shared my love of quiet mornings and meaningful conversations. "I like how comfortable you are with yourself," Sarah told me during our 3rd date. "So many men seem like they're pretending to be someone else." With Reena, I'd spent 4 years trying to become someone she could be proud of. With Sarah, I could just be myself, the guy who preferred small gatherings, found joy in solving problems, and valued honesty above social status. We built our relationship on mutual respect rather than drama. Sarah had her own successful practice and didn't need me to be her entertainment. When we disagreed, we talked it through like adults. "She's good for you," my brother observed after meeting her. "You seem like yourself again." Through mutual friends, I learned Reena had her baby and moved back to Pennsylvania. Blake had indeed walked away, though I suspected there was more to that story. A year later, I proposed to Sarah in the same quiet way I proposed to Reena, but this time, everything felt different. This time, I was marrying someone who loved me exactly as I was. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, showing me the ring with tears in her eyes. "I'm not exactly the life of the party type." "That's exactly why I'm sure," I replied. Looking back, Reena did me a favor by showing her true colors so dramatically. If she'd been more subtle, I might have spent years trapped in a marriage that slowly destroyed my confidence. Instead, I learned that real love doesn't require you to be anyone other than who you already are. That lesson was worth every moment of pain it took to learn.